The property management company called me at 2:45 p.m. on a Wednesday to discuss concerns about unauthorized occupancy in my downtown apartment. The same downtown apartment I hadn't set foot in for 3 years. The one my husband had insisted we didn't need anymore when we bought our suburban dream house. My name is Catherine Morrison, and for 8 years, I'd trusted my husband Marcus to handle our real estate investments while I focused on my medical practice. He'd been a successful property manager before we married, so when he suggested I let him optimize our portfolio, it seemed like perfect division of labor. What Marcus had forgotten, or perhaps hoped I'd forgotten, was that the downtown apartment was bought with my inheritance money and registered solely in my name. It was my property, managed by my husband, who'd apparently decided to use it for purposes that had nothing to do with generating rental income. Marcus had no idea that his forgotten property manager was about to discover exactly what kind of management he'd been providing. And what I found inside that apartment would end our marriage, destroy his career, and teach him that some properties come with owners who don't appreciate unauthorized renovations to their investments. Picture this: a colonial mansion in Westchester County, where I'd spend my mornings reviewing patient charts before heading to my cardiology practice, while Marcus managed our growing real estate portfolio from his home office. We'd built what everyone considered the perfect marriage: successful doctor, talented property manager, financial success built on complementary expertise. My cardiology practice was thriving, treating high-profile patients who valued both my medical skills and my discretion. I worked 12-hour days, performed complex procedures, and came home to a husband who'd handled all our financial complexities, so I could focus on saving lives. "Don't worry about the portfolio, Kat," Marcus would tell me over dinner. "I've got everything optimized. The downtown property isn't generating the returns we need anymore. The neighborhood's changing. Maintenance costs are rising. We should consider selling." "Whatever you think is best, sweetheart. You're the expert on real estate. I trust your judgment completely." Trust. Such a dangerous word when you're dealing with someone who's systematically betraying it. For 3 years, Marcus had been telling me our downtown apartment was a problematic asset. The neighborhood was declining, he claimed. Finding reliable tenants was becoming impossible. The maintenance costs were eating into our profits. I'd believed every word because Marcus presented detailed reports showing declining rental income, increasing repair costs, and market analysis suggesting we should liquidate the property. His presentations were thorough, professional, and completely fabricated. The first crack in Marcus's story appeared 6 months ago when I attended a medical conference downtown and drove past our problematic apartment building. The neighborhood looked vibrant, not declining. New restaurants, trendy boutiques, obvious signs of gentrification that should have increased our property value, not decreased it. But I trusted my husband's expertise over my casual observation. After all, what did I know about real estate trends? Marcus was the professional who'd built his career on understanding property values and market dynamics. That trust lasted until the property management company called me directly. "Dr. Morrison? This is Jennifer Walsh from Metropolitan Property Services. We've been trying to reach you about some irregularities with your downtown apartment. There are unauthorized occupants, and we have concerns about lease violations and potential property damage." "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. My husband Marcus handles all our property management. He would have told me if there were any issues." "Dr. Morrison, according to our records, you're listed as the sole owner of this property. We've been sending notices to your husband for months about violations, but the situation has escalated. We need to discuss this with the actual property owner." That's when I understood that Marcus hadn't just been mismanaging our investment property. He'd been lying about it completely. The apartment I'd bought with my inheritance, the property that was supposed to be generating rental income, was being used for purposes that required discussions with the actual property owner. I told Jennifer I'd handle the situation personally and hung up with the growing realization that my husband had been systematically deceiving me about an asset worth nearly $500,000. Marcus had forgotten that the downtown apartment belonged to me, not us. He'd spent 3 years telling me it was a failing investment while using it for his own purposes. Now, he was about to discover what happened when you tried to misappropriate property that belonged to a woman who'd spent 15 years cutting people open and putting them back together with surgical precision. That afternoon, I cleared my surgery schedule and drove downtown to inspect my problematic investment property. What I found there would change everything about my marriage and Marcus's life. The downtown apartment building looked nothing like the declining property Marcus had described in his reports. Fresh paint, updated landscaping, and a lobby renovation that suggested the building management was investing in improvements, not struggling with maintenance costs. I used my original key, the one Marcus didn't know I'd kept, to enter the apartment I'd bought with my grandmother's inheritance 8 years ago. The same apartment Marcus had insisted was too expensive to maintain and impossible to rent profitably. What I found inside made my medical training in trauma assessment irrelevant. No amount of professional composure could have prepared me for the evidence of systematic betrayal that had been taking place in my own property. The apartment had been completely renovated with expensive fixtures, designer furniture, and amenities that would have cost tens of thousands of dollars. This wasn't the declining rental property Marcus had described. It was a luxury love nest furnished with money that should have been going toward our joint investments. But the renovations were just the beginning. Evidence of recent occupancy was everywhere. Women's clothing in sizes I'd never worn, toiletries I'd never purchased, jewelry I'd never seen, and photographs displaying a relationship I'd never been part of. In the bedroom, the same bedroom where Marcus and I had spent our first night as homeowners 8 years ago, I found a dresser drawer filled with documents that told the complete story of his deception. Bank statements showing Marcus had been depositing my rental income checks into his personal account while telling me the property was losing money. Receipts for furniture, renovations, and luxury purchases that explained where our declining investment returns had actually been going. But the most damning evidence was a lease agreement dated 6 months ago, showing that Marcus had been renting my apartment to his girlfriend for $500 per month, roughly 1/10 of the market rate, while telling me the property was vacant and costing us money. The girlfriend's name was Amanda Chen, 28 years old according to the driver's license copy attached to the lease. Her employment information showed she worked as a marketing coordinator at a startup downtown, walking distance from the apartment Marcus had been subsidizing with my inheritance money. Photographs throughout the apartment showed Marcus and Amanda in domestic scenarios that spanned at least 2 years. Cooking together in the kitchen I'd chosen, relaxing in the living room I'd decorated, sleeping in the bed I'd bought when I thought the apartment would be our downtown retreat. Marcus hadn't just been having an affair. He'd been using my property as the foundation for an entirely separate relationship, funded by rental income that belonged to me, while telling me the investment was worthless. Using the same methodical approach I applied to complex medical cases, I documented everything, photographed every room, every personal item, every piece of evidence that proved Marcus had been living a double life in my apartment while lying to me about its value and occupancy. That's when I found Marcus's laptop, carelessly left on the dining table I'd purchased with my own money. Password protected. But Marcus had always been terrible with security. I tried our anniversary date. It worked immediately. What I discovered in his files was worse than anything I'd found in the physical space. Detailed financial records showing how he'd been systematically stealing from our joint investments to fund his relationship with Amanda. Spreadsheets tracking money diverted from our portfolio to support Amanda's lifestyle. Email correspondence about trips they'd taken using funds from our investment accounts. even planning documents for a future together that involved liquidating assets I'd contributed to our marriage. Marcus had been using my inheritance property as his personal love nest while embezzling from our joint accounts to support his girlfriend's lifestyle. He'd turned my investment into his playground while convincing me it was a financial burden we should eliminate. But what Marcus had forgotten was that I wasn't just a trusting wife who'd let him handle our finances. I was a cardiovascular surgeon who'd spent 15 years making life and death decisions under pressure. Someone who understood exactly how to assess damage and determine the most effective course of treatment. Marcus had diagnosed our marriage as terminal while using my property to plan his recovery. Now I was going to show him what happened when you tried to operate on someone who was far more skilled at cutting people apart than you'd ever imagined. The beauty of being a surgeon is that you learn to work with absolute precision under extreme pressure. Every decision is calculated, every movement is deliberate, and every outcome is the result of careful planning executed flawlessly. Marcus was about to discover exactly how those skills translated to situations outside the operating room. I spent the next week maintaining perfect normalcy at home while systematically documenting the scope of Marcus's deception. Every morning, I'd kiss him goodbye and go to work. Every evening, I'd listen to his fabricated reports about our struggling real estate portfolio while compiling evidence of his systematic fraud. Using financial forensics techniques I'd learned during my divorce law consultation training, I traced every dollar Marcus had diverted from our joint accounts to support his relationship with Amanda. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, vacation expenses, jewelry purchases, all funded with money that belonged to both of us while he told me we needed to reduce spending. But Marcus's financial fraud was just one element of his deception. He'd also been manipulating our entire real estate portfolio to hide the income from my apartment while maximizing his access to cash for his secret relationship. I created a comprehensive analysis that would have impressed any forensic accountant. Every fraudulent expense, every diverted payment, every lie he'd told about our property values, all documented with the same attention to detail I applied to complex surgical procedures. Then I started making strategic contacts. Not confrontational calls, but professional inquiries that would establish the foundation for what came next. Hello, this is Dr. Catherine Morrison. I need to discuss the management of my downtown property with someone who can review potential violations of fiduciary duty by my current property manager. Within 3 days, I'd consulted with a real estate attorney, a divorce lawyer, and a financial forensics specialist. Not because I was planning immediate action, but because I needed to understand every legal implication of Marcus's deception before deciding how to proceed. What I learned was that Marcus hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He'd committed several forms of fraud that could result in criminal charges, civil liability, and professional consequences that would destroy his property management career. That's when I implemented what I privately called the surgical approach. Like any complex operation, success depended on precise timing, careful preparation, and the ability to execute multiple procedures simultaneously without making any mistakes. First, I visited my apartment again, this time with a locksmith, a photographer, and a legal witness who could document the unauthorized occupancy and property modifications that Marcus had hidden from me. Can you confirm that these renovations were completed without the property owner's knowledge or consent? I asked the witness, a paralegal from my attorney's office. Based on the timeline you've provided and the lease documentation, yes. This appears to be unauthorized use of the property with substantial modifications completed without proper notification. Next, I contacted Amanda Chen directly, not for a confrontation, but for a conversation that would establish exactly what she knew about the apartment's ownership and the source of the subsidized rent she'd been paying. Miss Chen? This is Dr. Catherine Morrison. I'm the owner of the apartment you're currently renting from my husband Marcus. I need to discuss some irregularities with your lease agreement. Amanda's response revealed that she'd been as deceived as I had been, though in a different way. Marcus had told her the apartment belonged to his business, that he was authorized to rent it at below market rates, and that she shouldn't mention the arrangement to anyone because of complex business tax implications. Amanda wasn't the villain in this story. She was another victim of Marcus's systematic deception, which meant my surgical approach would focus entirely on the person who'd orchestrated this elaborate fraud while betraying everyone involved. Marcus had spent 3 years using my property as the foundation for his secret relationship, while embezzling from our joint accounts to support a lifestyle I knew nothing about. Now, I was going to demonstrate exactly what happened when you tried to operate on someone who was far more skilled at precision work than you'd ever imagined. Sound of final preparations. That evening, I prepared for the most important surgical procedure of my career, one that would remove Marcus from my life with the same precision I used to remove damaged tissue from my patients' hearts. Friday evening arrived with Marcus in particularly good spirits, probably because he'd spent the afternoon at our apartment with Amanda, while telling me he was dealing with difficult tenant issues that required his personal attention. I prepared his favorite meal, herb-crusted salmon with risotto, while he showered and changed into casual clothes. The same routine we'd followed for 8 years, except this time I was planning the most precise confrontation of our marriage. "You seem relaxed tonight," I observed as Marcus settled into his chair at our dining room table. "Did you resolve those property management issues you've been dealing with?" "Actually, yes. I think we're finally making progress on liquidating that problematic downtown apartment. I've got a potential buyer interested, but the price will be lower than we hoped. Market conditions, you know." "That's interesting. What price are they offering for my apartment?" Marcus looked up from his salmon with confusion that quickly transformed into panic as he realized what I'd said. "Your apartment?" "Kat, what are you talking about? We own that property jointly." "No, Marcus. I own that property, with my inheritance money, solely in my name. The same apartment you've been telling me is worthless while using it as a love nest for your girlfriend Amanda." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's face went through a spectrum of emotions: confusion, panic, calculation, and finally, desperate deflection. "Catherine, I don't know what you think you've discovered, but there's been some misunderstanding." "The misunderstanding, Marcus, is that you forgot I owned the property you've been stealing from me. Let me clarify the situation with the same precision I use in the operating room." I placed the evidence on our dining table with the same systematic approach I used when presenting complex cases to medical colleagues. Bank statements, lease agreements, photographs, financial records, everything arranged in chronological order that told the complete story of his deception. "For 3 years, you've been collecting $3,200 monthly rental income from my property, while telling me it was vacant and losing money. You've been depositing that income into your personal account while charging our joint accounts for fictitious maintenance expenses. You've renovated my apartment using funds diverted from our investment portfolio, then rented it to your girlfriend for $500 per month while telling me the neighborhood was declining and the property was worthless." "Catherine, please, you don't understand. Amanda and I, it's not what it looks like. I was trying to help you, to protect our investment." "What you were trying to do, Marcus, is steal approximately $115,000 in rental income while embezzling additional funds from our joint accounts to support your girlfriend's lifestyle. What you were trying to do is commit fraud while convincing me to sell my property so you could access the proceeds." Marcus sat back down heavily, finally understanding that his careful deception had been discovered and documented by someone with far more analytical skills than he'd anticipated. I've consulted with attorneys about both the financial fraud and the unauthorized use of my property. I've documented everything with the same thoroughness I use for medical procedures. And I've prepared divorce papers that ensure you'll face consequences for every dollar you've stolen and every lie you've told. You have two choices, Marcus. You can sign these papers tonight and agree to full restitution for your theft, or you can face criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and unauthorized use of my property while fighting a divorce that will expose every detail of your deception publicly. You forgot that I owned the apartment where you built your secret life. Now you're going to discover what happens when you try to operate on someone who's far more skilled at cutting people apart than you ever imagined. Marcus signed the divorce papers at 11:47 p.m. after spending 3 hours trying to negotiate terms with someone who'd spent 15 years making life-and-death decisions under pressure. Every attempt at manipulation, every promise of counseling, every plea for a second chance was met with the same clinical precision I used to remove damaged tissue from patients' hearts. By midnight, Marcus had agreed to complete financial restitution, immediate vacation of our shared home, and a settlement that left him with minimal assets and maximum consequences for his systematic betrayal. But the financial settlement was just the beginning of Marcus's education about precision and consequences. His property management license required disclosure of any legal judgments related to fiduciary misconduct, which meant his career would be as damaged as our marriage. Within a week, Marcus's employer had terminated his position after learning about the judgment against him for misappropriating client property. The real estate community was smaller than he'd realized, and word spread quickly about a property manager who'd stolen from his own wife while embezzling rental income. I also took the liberty of contacting Amanda Chen, not for confrontation, but to ensure she understood her lease was invalid and she'd need to find alternative housing. The conversation revealed that she'd been as deceived as I had been, believing Marcus was separated and that the apartment arrangement was legitimate. Miss Chen, I want to be clear that you're not responsible for my husband's deception. However, as the property owner, I need you to understand that your lease was unauthorized and you'll need to make other arrangements within 30 days. Amanda was apologetic and cooperative, even offering to provide testimony about Marcus's lies if needed for legal proceedings. She genuinely believed his story about being divorced and authorized to rent the apartment at reduced rates. 6 months later, I was sitting in my reclaimed downtown apartment, now properly renovated according to my own taste, rather than Marcus's secret relationship needs, reviewing applications from legitimate tenants who would pay market rate for the property. The apartment was generating $4,200 monthly income, significantly more than the $500 Marcus had been collecting from Amanda while stealing the actual rental payments. My worthless investment had become one of the most profitable properties in my portfolio. My medical practice had also benefited from the clarity that came with removing toxic elements from my personal life. Colleagues commented on my renewed focus and energy, not knowing that surgical precision in marriage termination had the same beneficial effects as surgical precision in medical procedures. I'd also begun dating again, something that felt revolutionary after 8 years, with someone who'd been systematically deceiving me while using my own property as the foundation for his betrayal. I have to ask, Doctor. Michael Harrison had said over dinner at a restaurant I could easily afford with my increased rental income. How did you handle discovering your husband's deception so systematically? Most people would have confronted him immediately. I realized that my surgical training was perfectly applicable to personal situations requiring precision and careful planning. Marcus tried to steal from me using my own property, but he forgot that surgeons are very good at removing things that don't belong. 2 years after Marcus's removal from my life, I was standing on the balcony of my downtown apartment, now serving as my weekend retreat between demanding surgical schedules, watching the sunset over a neighborhood that had never been declining. The property Marcus had declared worthless was now worth nearly $600,000, having appreciated significantly since the neighborhood's continued gentrification. My problematic investment had become the anchor of a real estate portfolio that was funding early retirement and international medical missions. Marcus was working as a sales associate at a suburban real estate office, his property management career permanently destroyed by the professional misconduct judgment. His new position required full disclosure of his legal history, ensuring that every employer and client knew about his conviction for misappropriating property while embezzling rental income. More importantly, his pattern of deception had been documented so thoroughly that any future romantic partners could easily discover his history of financial fraud and marital betrayal. Digital reputations, I'd learned, were as permanent as surgical scars. My own reputation had been enhanced by the professional way I'd handled the situation. Rather than becoming the bitter, vindictive ex-wife that Marcus had probably expected, I demonstrated the same clinical competence in managing personal crisis that had made me successful in medicine. Michael and I had been together for over a year, building a relationship based on mutual respect for each other's professional expertise and personal integrity. He was a thoracic surgeon who understood the demands of medical practice and appreciated a partner who could handle complex challenges with both skill and grace. "You know what I love about this apartment?" Michael had said during our first weekend staying downtown together. "You can tell it's been chosen and decorated by someone with excellent taste and attention to detail. Every element works perfectly together." It should. I've had several opportunities to get the details exactly right. Marcus had tried to steal my property and use it as the foundation for betraying our marriage, while convincing me the investment was worthless. What he'd discovered was that some properties come with owners who understand exactly how to perform precise extractions when unauthorized elements try to establish themselves. The secret apartment he'd forgotten I owned had ended our marriage instantly, not because of what I'd found inside, but because of what finding it had revealed about my own capabilities when dealing with systematic deception. Marcus had underestimated both my property ownership and my surgical precision. The combination had taught him that some mistakes require complete removal rather than attempted repair. He'd tried to steal my apartment and use it to plan his escape from our marriage. Instead, I'd used my ownership of that property to demonstrate exactly why you should never try to operate on someone who spent 15 years perfecting the art of cutting out damaged tissue. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's using your superior skills to ensure that someone's unauthorized modifications to your life result in their complete removal from it. And trust me, I was exceptionally good at surgical extractions.